Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar around Ribbon Connect for Microsoft Teams Direct Routing. Today, we aim to show you how partners can benefit from Ribbon's new as-a-service offering to add enterprise voice to Microsoft Teams. My name is Daniel Shepherd. I'm the Business Development Manager for Techland, and joining us for today's presentation, we have Kevin Baines, Ribbon's Head of Channel and Distribution for EMEA, Greg Swig, Ribbon's Director of Solutions Marketing, as well as Techland's own Eamon Burke, who's our Technical Services and Pre-Sales Manager. Now, before we start, I have a couple of sort of housekeeping bits I wanted to go through. So firstly, there will be a recorded archive made available of today's event. You can also submit a question at any stage using the Q&A section on the platform. We will be addressing questions at the end. And if we don't have time to cover all the questions, I will be in contact after the event to make sure that you get an answer. So before we begin, I just wanted to give you a brief background on Techland. So if I can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Techland have been around since 1983. We cut our teeth on the emerging VoIP market. Then Microsoft came to the UC scene around 15 years ago. Since then, Techland have been heavily involved as a value-added distributor, working closely with our trusted partners, some of which started with as little as 2 or 3 employees and are now some of the largest unified communications companies in the world. So as a company, we're very technical, very hands-on. We understand our vendor products extremely well. We can assist with all stages of the sales cycle. So that's pre-sales design, product services quotations, through to shipping requirements, and most importantly, supporting the end product. So we offer help desk level 1 and level 2 support across our entire portfolio, and we aren't a broadliner. We only focus on a handful of key vendors and take great pride in understanding and owning the products and from a technical perspective. This is reflected through our awards and our industry recognition. We can go on to the next slide, thanks. So just before we get into discussing Ribbon Connect in more detail, just wanted to touch on some of the services available from Techland. So firstly, sort of bottom left, we have Swoop Datacom, which is our provisioning and management for SIP phones and endpoints. And then at the top, we've got Clarify from Oak Innovation. This is our compliant recording and analytics for Microsoft Teams platform. And then sort of middle left, we've got Ribbon. So of course, with Ribbon, we've got the core carrier grade SBCs, the 5000, 7000 series. And then there's also the virtualized SWE core versions of those. We then have the enterprise SBCs, so that's in the form of the SBC 1000, SBC 2000 appliances, and the SWE Lite virtualized versions of those. We've then got the Ribbon Edge Mark, Intelligent Edge, for future-proofing SIP trunking and unified communication deployments. There's also the Edge View Service Control Management and Ribbon Protect, offering analytics and security across your customer's network. And then obviously we've got Ribbon Connect, which is what we'll be discussing and presenting today. So if I can just direct your attention to the right quickly, I just want to cover some of Techland's value-added services. So Ribbon Connect is supported by Ribbon for Ribbon accredited partners, but for any partners that don't have a sufficient support structure in place, Techland can offer a support overlay facility. This will help provide support on your behalf. So that's about it for me to start with. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague now, Eamon Burke, so we can start today's presentation. So over to you, Eamon.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. So we speak to a lot of partners and integrators about direct routing and Ribbon Connect, and there's 2 frequent questions that crop up. They are, why don't I just use a calling plan from Microsoft, or why don't I use a carrier offering from one of the carriers out there? We also look at or explore the option of deploying a dedicated SBC, but that's a CapEx purchase, so that's kind of a different conversation. So first off, let's look at calling plans. Microsoft calling plans on the surface appear to be nice and easy, but are they your best option going forward? Putting a customer on the calling plan removes you from that value chain with that customer. So once they're signed up, they're billed by Microsoft, and there's not really much value you can add to that customer, and you also lose that stickiness with the customer too. And calling plans are not available in all countries either, or all regions. And there's limited number of calling bundles with minutes, domestic and international, that are available, which may or may not fit all customers. They're also not the most competitive rates on the market, so that increases the overall long-term cost of the solution. So while calling plans might suit some customers, the vast majority will be better off exploring a direct routing solution. So next slide, please. So what about direct routing via a carrier or an MSP? On first glance, this can appear to be an attractive offer as well. You purchase the trunks and then it's plumbed directly into that customer's Teams tenant. However, there are some things to bear in mind with that. Firstly, you're locked to one carrier. Many customers out there like to have 2 or more carriers out there. That's just for resiliency reasons. And also it becomes much harder to move to another carrier if you want to in the future, if they're also providing the direct routing integration for your customer as well. Yeah, many customers also only cover one region, which can be an issue for many end customers, particularly if you've got a global deployment. The customer would have the issue of having to, or yourselves would have the issue of dealing with multiple carriers in multiple different regions, which can be difficult. You usually also have to configure the Azure tenant yourself. So some of it is done through the Azure GUI, but unfortunately there are some PowerShell commands that you need to run as well. And these are scripts. So these are engineering tasks, which ultimately add to the complexity of deploying it. It means you need an engineer, and it increases the overall cost of the configuration and deployment of the solution. And lastly, there's the contract terms as well, which are often quite restrictive. They might have a minimum number of users, and quite often there's multi-year terms baked into that as well. So these hurdles are overcome with Ribbon Connect. And now I'm going to hand over to Greg at Ribbon, who will cover this in more detail. So over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Damon. And thanks everybody for joining us today. As Damon mentioned, I'm Greg Zweig, going to look after a number of our unified communications products here at Ribbon. And we're going to jump into the content, but just 2 quick slides on who we are if you're not familiar with the company. Ribbon's a relatively new brand, formed 3 or 4 years ago, but many of you, if you don't know the Ribbon name, certainly know many of the other products in our portfolio. Our heritage comes from Nortel, from Genband, from Sonos Networks, from Edgewater Networks, and most recently ECI Telecom. The company is based in North America, but over half of our revenue comes from outside of North America, which for you as partners recognize we have a substantial organization available to support you and Techland in Europe. We do business today in about 140 countries, a little under $1 billion in revenue, a little over 3,500 employees, and we have a significant R&D investment in session border controllers. So, we launched Ribbon Connect in 2020, late 2020, early 2021, but we've been working with Microsoft for over 14 years, going all the way back to Office Communicator. So we have a substantial investment in Microsoft technology and partnership. We meet with them every week on various things. We're one of only 2 vendors who has our session border controllers deployed inside the Microsoft development environment. So every time a Teams version gets created, it gets tested against our SBC environment as part of Microsoft's test environment. We continue to invest and innovate in this space, and you're going to see more new products from us as 2020 continues. So why has Ribbon invested so heavily in Microsoft? Well, the reason is because we see 2020 in particular, 2021, excuse me, what year is it? 2021 as a particularly impactful year for Microsoft. So many of you know these numbers. Microsoft just released again up to 145 million daily active Teams users. Most of those people are using Teams for screen sharing and web meetings and so on. Only 10 to 15% actually have dial tone bolted into Teams. So what we think is that because Teams is included in Microsoft 365, and because of the tremendous growth as a result of the pandemic, we think that the next step for a lot of CIOs and IT managers is to say, okay, I have all these trained users. What else can I leverage this platform for? And so we think that the place where they're going, and that's what we see, and I think many of you see in terms of the phone calls coming into your environments, is they're saying, how can I use Teams to replace a legacy phone system? Now, before we get into how you do that, just a couple of quick terms so that everybody understands the same terminology when we discuss the Microsoft environment. Microsoft 365, that's Microsoft's new name for Office 365. Like all big companies, they change the name, make one thing something else. Microsoft Phone System, this is basically the PBX services inside of Teams. What's important to recognize is that Microsoft Phone System is a per user license. There is no way to buy an enterprise license for phone system. Each user needs to enable phone system. And then there's Microsoft Direct Routing. I think most of you probably know what that is. That's just Microsoft's name for SIP trunking. The key thing relative to that is that Microsoft requires a certified session border controller to connect Microsoft phone system to the PSTN. We get this question a lot because it's an area of confusion, which is which Teams licenses do I need? This comes up a lot with customers, but we see it also occasionally with partners. Phone system is included in the E5 license, right? So you pay a premium for the E5, but it comes with it. It also comes with the potential for phone dial-in numbers for a web conference. If a customer has E3 or E1, or if they have, sometimes they're called A5. I think they use those for the for education in certain verticals. But basically, if they have an E3 or an E1, they have to pay the premium phone system license. The list price on that, US dollars, excuse me, but similar in pounds, is $8 per month. And that would be on top of. And again, as I mentioned, that is required on a per user basis. The other question we get a lot is, why does Microsoft require an SBC for direct routing? Well, really, they require it for three different reasons. One is for inspection. So the SBC does, wire speed inspection of all the traffic, looking for anyone who's has unauthorized access. It also encrypts and plays kind of a traffic cop function in the sense that if any type of denial of service attack is launched on a customer, its job is to filter out the voice traffic from all the junk that's being pushed at it. And last but not least, in many cases, I think many would say maybe most important is interoperability in the sense that it has the fine-tuning knobs, because if you've been in this business as long as I have, you know that regardless of all the SIP standards out there, nothing ever seems to work perfectly with anything else. So as a result, it's there to be able to turn the knobs to make sure that if you mix and match different products together and different SIP trunking providers, everything works together. Now, Eamon mentioned a minute ago, there is, traditional options to deliver a connection between Teams and the PSTN. And, the common ones are the on-premise SBC, either a physical piece of hardware or a white box software scenario. And that's certainly still popular, and it's certainly something we support, and the Techland team can help you with that. And likewise, we have public cloud options available as well, where you can acquire the software loaded in Azure or AWS and run it out of there. Now, obviously, in the left-hand model, you're still bringing the SIP trunk into the customer premise, and sometimes we're doing that so that we can connect some sort of legacy contact center or third-party devices. In the right-hand model, public cloud, is a scenario where dial tone's going directly to the SBC in the cloud. But what's a challenge in some cases for you all to sell is if both of these require a CapEx purchase. And some customers who are on the way into a Teams environment aren't ready to shell out X number of dollars for a physical device, or simply don't want to. They're saying, hey, you know what? I want to go to the cloud. I want to get out of this model of having to own my own hardware and dealing with obsolescence. And here you are, Mr. Reseller, telling me I got to buy a box in order to get to the cloud. So with that in mind, that's why we created Ribbon Connect for Microsoft Teams Direct Routing. This is a true as-a-service model. So neither you nor the customer own any hardware. The idea here, and you can sort of, if you look at the middle of the slide, I have a little stack here, a purple stack, is that we layer together basically 4 different things, which is at the bottom, we take our traditional SBC services. So that gives you all the certified security you would expect. And then we layer on top of that a SIP PBX integration service. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. But this is kind of a new model that gives you a better way to connect a PBX, legacy PBX, into Teams. And then on top of that, maybe one of the most valuable parts of the equation is we have a Microsoft Teams integration service. And what this is a set of tools that allow you to go into the environment and in a web format, configure all the services for Teams. Because for those of you who've ever worked inside PowerShell, which sort of feels like a 90s text interface, it's not easy to use. It's very obscure. So we take away all that complexity and we put it all together inside this end-to-end workflow portal. And so what that delivers really is this complete end-to-end service, which gives you the ability to have all the security expected, the opportunity to integrate with a traditional PBX, compelling and differentiated Microsoft Teams integration services in an easy-to-use model that's easier for your teams to deploy and manage. No hardware, no software to maintain, all cloud-based. And I touched on this whole portal idea. So this is really, these are some screenshots. It's really this simple, which is you go in, your account's set up, you go in, add a customer, add the names of the users. Yes, we have Active Directory integration. Yes, we have bulk load, upload tools. You go in, pick the services that they want. And then once you've configured the individual users, you literally press a button called Enable Sync, and it pushes the configuration up to Teams. So it's really a tremendous time saver. And we have a couple of videos online where we have resellers like yourselves who've already started to use Ribbon Connect, and they talk about themselves how they've seen a change in the cost and complexity go down as they delivered Ribbon Connect. So how does it work? Well, it's pretty darn simple, particularly if you use it in its most basic model. And in its most basic model, what we do is I'm just going to build it out here. If you simply configure Ribbon Connect to the IP addresses of your dial tone provider. Ribbon doesn't provide the dial tone, Techland doesn't provide the dial tone. You, as a customer, choose the provider, if it's BT, if it's Gamma, if it's someone else, TalkTalk, whoever it might be. You put in the information, you configure Ribbon Connect, it connects to the PSTN, it connects to Microsoft Teams. Suddenly you have a user who on their desktop can use the calling functions built into Teams, right? Now, what's even more interesting is we have a slightly different model if you have an existing PBX. And we certainly run into scenarios where customers say, hey, look, I like Teams, I'm really interested in Teams, but my challenge is that I have a business process, I have an investment, I have some other variable that prevents me from simply yanking all of that out. Maybe I have some sort of a workflow process. I have some sort of a grain mill somewhere that has these unique explosion-proof phones. There's a million scenarios where people say, hey, I like Teams, but I have a reason why I need to hold on to what I have. And so if that's the case, we have a really unique model for that, which is what we can do is you can have your traditional PBX. So, make up a name, Mitel, Avaya, 3CX, whatever it might be, Cisco. And traditional model, dial tone goes into the PBX, right? If a call comes in, it rings the PBX user, right? Pretty straightforward. What we do is actually with Ribbon Connect, we'll actually register to that existing PBX as another soft phone user for that individual, right? So now when a call comes in, the PBX is forking the call. It's ringing Ribbon Connect and it's ringing the PBX user. And when that happens, you have a scenario where the call goes into the PBX, it's forked, and if the user has a Teams client, the user has a PBX phone, it'll actually ring them both at the same time. And I have a little more detailed view of that slide here, where basically what you see is if there's a user like Jane Patel, she can pick up either device. What's fantastic is there's presence. So if Jane picks up her Teams client and starts to make a call with her headset, the presence for other users on the traditional PBX will represent that she's on the phone. If Jane is part of a group inside that PBX, maybe she's part of a hunt group or a calling group, not only will her legacy desk phone ring, but her Teams client will ring. So there's a level of tight integration that you just can't get with a traditional SIP forking model that you would do, say, with one of our SBC 1000 or 2000s. Ribbon Connect really gives you a different set of tools. And we often get asked, well, what are the limitations? Well, the limitation is simply that you need a PBX in the customer environment that supports SIP soft phones. If you can register a SIP soft phone, then you can use this solution. And what's compelling for you as a reseller about Ribbon Connect in this environment is that it allows you to extend your existing PBX revenue streams. So if you're a reseller today, maybe you have a Monetise practice or a 3CX practice out there, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm interested in Teams, but I don't necessarily want to rip all this stuff out tomorrow afternoon and lose the revenue stream I have against that. Well, Ribbon Connect gives you a fantastic way of getting customers engaged, because what you want to do is make sure that you have an offer as a partner to go out and talk to those customers about. What you don't want to have happen is you don't want those customers out calling somebody else and having them come in and say, oh, I'll just take it all out, in which case you're out of the game. This gives you a way to sort of give customers a solution, and many customers will come to you and say, hey, I want to start out with the 20 top people in my company. I want the executives, I want the salespeople, I want them to have Teams, because you know what? I really value this mobile client, and I see that as the most impactful thing that I can deliver with Teams. If you do that with Ribbon Connect, that gives you a way you can have both of these in place for 3-5 years, whatever is appropriate for the customer. So there's a tremendous amount of upside and no downside to operating in this environment. And from a customer perspective, they're still getting the native Teams experience through Ribbon Connect, even if they're connected through a Mitel or a Cisco or a Avaya or whatever else. So, hey, the mobile client works exactly like it would always work in Teams. The desktop client works in many regards. If they're using Teams every day, they'll never even know the Mitel or the 3CX is there, except when somebody on that system calls them and they realize it's easy to get a hold of them, or if they need to call the help desk, they can still dial 1004 and the help desk is still there at 1004. So hopefully that gives you a view of why Ribbon Connect is really more than just an SBC. That's the one thing we want to get across. This is not just an SBC in the cloud. We give you a whole set of richer services. We get rid of the PowerShell. We give you a different level of PBX integration. We give you a whole new workflow, which really saves time for your employees and your skill set of your people. We speed up deployment because you're not spending, hours and hours with all this stuff. There's no hardware out of pocket for you. There's no big investment. We're not coming to you and saying, hey, you got to spend $1 million up front so you can sell this thing. It's a couple hours of training and you're ready to go. And in terms of simplicity, you'll never get simpler than the way this thing licenses up. There's 2 SKUs, right? There's a PBX SKU, which is for if you want PBX integration, and a trunk SKU, and that's if you don't want PBX integration. Basically, pay as you go. We keep track of what you're using on a monthly basis. We charge you for that in advance, and then we true it up. So if you add or subtract users, we clean all that up. So it's super straightforward. You can see all your own billing. There's no minimums. There's no commitment. You're not signing up for 3 years. Your customers aren't signing up for 3 years. They can have 1 user, 1 month if that's what it takes. And what's even nicer is it's super easy to get customers started because we provide an instant 30-day trial as part of the portal. So you don't have to call Techland. You don't have to call Ribbon. You don't have to send anybody an email. Once you're set up in the portal, all you have to do is go in there, add the users, the customer's name and information, set them up with up to 25 licenses, trial licenses. Those go for 30 days. We don't extend them. Get a one-time shot. You fire up the licenses, you hand them out to the customers, they use them. Either they convert them to permanent licenses or they go off the trial. If they say, hey, I need another 30 days of trial, we'll just sign them up for 30 days. They pay, a few pounds each to keep the trial going for another 30, 60 days. And if at that point they don't want to do it, they can cancel. It's not going to kill them, right? So it's really a compelling environment because, as I said, no upfront costs, no infrastructure, limited people skills. It's all supported by ourselves in Techland. We have an in-region 24/7 NOC based in Prague. We've had that Prague center, I don't know, probably 15 years, something like that. All our own people working in there. They all know the SBC portfolio. They know Ribbon Connect. So you don't have to worry about the fact that if you call with a problem, they're not gonna get somebody in time zone who knows how to help you out. And so with that, I'm gonna hand it back to Daniel, who's gonna, and Eamon, who I believe are gonna tell you a little bit more about some of the offers that Techland is doing associated with this new product.
Thanks very much, Greg. So yes, just a couple of bits before I sort of carry on to let you know about what the takeaways are from today's webinar. So firstly, it's not too late to ask a question. If you do have a question, then you can ask the question using the Q&A section on the platform. So just to reiterate, we will be sharing the recorded archives and the slides later on. That will be both via email, and also we'll be sharing the recorded archive on Techland's YouTube page. Now, the most important thing is to experience the platform yourself. So as Greg was saying with the trial, please do contact us to set up your free 30-day trial. That can be for yourselves or for your end customers as well. You can have one for both. Now, we do have a special offer that's only available for attendees of today's event. So to show our appreciation for your time this afternoon, Ribbon have kindly offered the first three end customers that commit to a paid Ribbon Connect subscription their first month for free. Now, this is on top of the initial 30-day trial, so it's not instead of, it's on top of. So to complement this, Techland would also decided to offer the same free end customers a complimentary implementation installation service. Now, to qualify for this offer, you simply need to send us an email after the webinar to register your opportunity. Now, there are a few caveats, so forgive me if this next bit sounds a bit like a radio advert. This offer only applies to partners that registered for and joined today's webinar, and it only applies for the first three end customers to start the paid subscription of Ribbon Connect service before the 15th of July 2021. So as I said, to take us up on this offer, you must register your interest with us by emailing sales@techland.co.uk. So the email address and our contact details are on the screen at the moment. You need to make sure that you do this by close of business on Friday, the 21st of May. You also need to register the end customer opportunity with us as well. So it's worth mentioning that as well as providing free Ribbon Connect implementation for the free qualifying end customers, Techland will also provide implementation services to the partner concerned. So you'll be able to enjoy a supported Ribbon Connect trial with Techland's assistance. So I think with that in mind, we'll see if we've got any questions that come in. It's going to hand over to Andrew from Ribbon.
Thanks, Daniel. So Greg, got a couple of questions here, which are quite good. First one, do I keep my own SIP trunks?
Yes, absolutely you do. You can use whomever as your existing SIP trunking provider, or if the customer wants a different SIP trunking provider than they have today, you can use them. We're not, there's no connection between Ribbon Connect and the SIP trunking provider of your choice.
Okay. And are there any templates for carriers, we've been asked?
There are. That's a great question. So inside of the portal, we have a whole group of templates, both for the service providers and specific legacy PBXs. So if you're trying to connect to, say, a 3CX and TalkTalk or something like that, you'll find those types of templates to. And on the flip side, let's say you have an obscure carrier, maybe you're doing some work outside the UK, you're over in Portugal, and you're saying, well, we don't have a template for that particular carrier. If that's the case, it's really easy that the menus are set up so that you can create your own environment quickly if a template doesn't exist.
Brilliant. Okay. Can I use this as a temporary solution between deployments?
Sure. I mean, you can use it for as many months as you so choose. So again, there's no commitment, no upper or lower limit on how many seats you put on it.
Excellent. Is there a self-service portal available for end customers and partners?
The self-service portal is really designed for partners. There's ability because it has layers of administration, so you could allow an end customer to go in there. Generally speaking, I think we would probably discourage it only because most customers probably do more harm than good. But you're not precluded from doing it technically. Certainly available for you all as partners. That's what it's there for.
How easy is it to add users? Normally anything with Microsoft gets complicated.
It is pretty straightforward to add users. Probably the most challenging part of this process always is the synchronization with Teams, because Microsoft sometimes is a little slow to respond. It might take 20 minutes or half an hour for the sync to actually finish up. But it includes Active Directory and all of the, we take away a huge amount of the burden of PowerShell. I actually had a real PowerShell screen up in one of the earlier slides, and that's just miserable.
And a really good one after that is how quickly is it to set up from start to finish?
Well, I suppose that depends on the number of users you have, but I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that between 30 and 60 minutes you could have a customer fully operational.
Fantastic. Can you buy a phone system license in Teams if you have an e-license, so you can't add phone system license to Business Premium? So that's a licensing question here.
I'm not gonna. I don't recall how Business Premium is structured because there's so many different little variants of Microsoft licensing. But the bottom line is Microsoft will pretty much let you add phone system to anything. So you should be able to add the incremental license. If it's not included, you should be able to add it.
Okay. How do we handle analog POTS lines?
Well, there's a couple options. You could use a physical gateway as an option. That'd probably be the easiest way.
Okay. If you're using Teams in parallel with an existing PBX with a fork as mentioned, I can see how the user can receive a call on the Teams with the PBX extension receives a call, but can you transfer calls from that Teams to another extension?
You can, if you can actuate, say, a transfer. So certainly you could transfer the call from Teams user to Teams user, but you could also actuate, depending on how transfer functions, and it might be different per PBX. But if if transfer allows you to use a star code on the existing PBX, then you could do that.
Okay, and